There are several Final Fantasy related phone games that have come out recently, so I am here to help you decide which ones are worth your time. So here we go. These are the top 6 free Final Fantasy phone games. Coming in at number 6, Justice Monsters 5. Now, this game is worth your time for one reason and one reason only, okay? It's in the world of Final Fantasy 15. It's not really a Final Fantasy 15 related game in the sense that it carries the story or has anything to do with the game, honestly. But in the world of Final Fantasy 15, they do reference Justice Monsters 5 as like a TV series and as an arcade game. It's the fictional superheroes of this fictional world of Final Fantasy 15. It's the people that all the kids know about, Justice Monsters 5. Now the phone game is pinball related. Now we don't really do pinball as much here in the United States, right? However, do it for about 30 minutes. Play this game for 30 minutes. And it'll at least give you an idea. You can kind of read about the story, you get to know a couple of the monsters, and you figure out what's going on in the world. Now, Justice Monsters 5 is actually in Final Fantasy 15. So if you don't really want to play it on your phone, you don't have to. You can play it in the real world. My suggestion is, since you don't have Final Fantasy 15 at the moment, you can just go ahead and play it right now, just to give yourself a little feel for what it's like, and they may mention it in the game before you get a chance to play it. So get your bases covered. The only reason to do this is so that you can go into Final Fantasy 15 knowing when they say, oh, this is like Justice Monsters 5, you can say, oh, sweet, I know what they're talking about. I've played that game. And that is why Justice Monsters 5 is number 6 on this Final Fantasy phone game list. Number 5, King's Knight. Now this is an interesting game. It's actually not out yet, but we've gotten a chance to play it ahead of time. It's cool. I mean, it's based on a game that Squaresoft made back in like 1986. This one, I mean, it wasn't related to Final Fantasy 15, obviously, back when it was first made. It's kind of been adapted and adjusted to fit into Final Fantasy 15's world now, but it's not really completely related to it. It's supposed to be kind of a game just like Justice Monsters 5. It's a game that the kids of the world of Final Fantasy 15 grew up playing, and that they're familiar with. And even in the Final Fantasy 15 Judgment demo that we have played, King's Knight is referenced in that game. And it's just a passing comment. It's just, oh, it's like King's Knight or something to that effect.
It just occurred to me, but this is totally like King's Knight.
Huh?
There's 4 of us, just like in the game.
Well, then I gotta be a 5-star character.
Now, just like Justice Monsters 5, you don't need to play this whole game. Just play a little bit of it so that you can know what they're referring to in Final Fantasy 15 when they talk about King's Knight. You do not need to play it for more than half an hour to an hour tops. Alright, and that is the only reason it's even on this list, by the way. Now we get to number 4, and we're getting into the Final Fantasy games here that you don't just play them so that you can know more about the world of 15. Well, those are the first 2. We're past that. You've only spent about an hour of your time so far playing games. Here's my next recommendation, All the Bravest. Now, All the Bravest is super cool conceptually, alright? But there's a reason it falls back to number 4 on the list of free mobile Final Fantasy related phone games. It's not as well thought out. It's not as well fleshed out. There's another game that we're going to talk about a little bit later that does a similar concept, different battle system, but similar concept, much, much better. The only reason to play All the Bravest would be to get the experience of battling with like 15 characters all at once. Now, it's a very fast-paced game. You've got to be able to move your thumb really quickly. This game definitely could have been better done. I still like it. It includes a lot of the classic Final Fantasy characters. All the Bravest is by far the lowest rated Final Fantasy phone game. By far. It's not even close. But in my opinion, it's still worth playing. It's worth your time more so than a King's Knight or Justice Monsters 5. Those games I would only recommend playing to get immersed into Final Fantasy 15. It's cool, the artwork's fun, really play it for an hour or 2, and after that you can go ahead and put it down and get to the next game on the list, which is going to serve you way better. Of the specific Final Fantasy games that Square Enix makes for mobile, this is probably the worst one. Now we move on to number 3. Mobius Final Fantasy. Now, Mobius is cool for one specific reason. It looks like a console game. The graphics are outstanding. They're wonderful. This is the best looking phone game I've ever seen. And we got to work with Square Enix to advertise this game a little bit on our main channel, and it was really fun to kind of see the game ahead of time. But in playing it, it's all meant to be played with one hand, right? You can do everything with one hand, and the graphics are just incredible. Now, it does have a story. You're some dude, I think your name's Van or something like that. You go around, there's this demon who comes up and he's like, hey, which of you has this name? And everyone has the same name. And the demon's deciding that, hey, one of you is the great warrior of legend, but you all have the same name, so we're going to figure out which one of you it is. And, of course, it's you. And you got to go around and fight all these monsters at all different points of time. And it's a battle-centric game. There's a few cutscenes that you can watch. There isn't really, world traversing or anything. It's just one battle after the other. And if you're into that, that's awesome. But if you're into Final Fantasy games, then go ahead and play Mobius. It looks wonderful. It's really cool. It's got a great story. You have to be into the battle system. If you're not into the battling all the time, and if you want a cool story, I'd say go ahead and skip this one. But it's definitely worth a few hours of your time. This game is all about the battles. The story, not so much. All right, it's there. It exists. There are a few cutscenes. But for the most part, you go from one battle to the next sequentially. The graphics are wonderful. You've got to at least play this game. All right, but how long you play it, that's up to you. I'd recommend only a few hours and then move on to the next one. Number 2. Now we're coming to the games that are absolutely phenomenal. The mind-blowing, the really perfectly executed phone games that Square Enix makes. Number 2 is Record Keeper. Record Keeper is awesome. And it's similar to all the Bravest in the sense that they're trying to include like a backstory. They're trying to include all of the other characters from other Final Fantasy games into one game. However, Record Keeper is all about the stories of those games. You can play Record Keeper and get the story of all the Final Fantasy games without having to actually play the games. Now, you won't understand exactly what's going on, right? I'd say this game isn't meant for people who've never played Final Fantasies to go through the stories, because that'd be a little confusing. It does jump around. It starts out in Final Fantasy VII, then I think it goes to Final Fantasy IV, and then ahead to 9, and it kind of goes around like that. It's not super linear. You kind of pick where you want to go, but you always start out on Final Fantasy VII. Now, Record Keeper is made for people who've already played the Final Fantasy games. This is a retrospective. This is a game that goes back to your nostalgia from those games and allows you to re-experience those stories in a completely different way. Now, it's still battle-focused. It's not like some open-world phone game where you get to run around and interact with people like that. You get some story, you get a lot of cutscenes, read through a lot of text, and then you fight a couple of battles. And that is kind of how the game goes. But the whole story is that there's this big magical castle that holds all of the memories from distant worlds and all of the stories that people tell. And they're all like kept in this castle, but somebody's come and stolen the paintings, stolen all the stories, and erased them. And you've got to go back in, find them, and then restore the paintings, restore the artwork. And it's really fun. I mean, the very beginning, you've got Final Fantasy VII, and you're on the bomb run. The very beginning of that game. And it retells the entire story of how those events went. And you fight the scorpion robot thing in the game. And now it has a gacha system. It has a lot of the pay to play, well, it's not pay to play, but pay to play well elements, I guess. You can earn money. There are ways to do it without. The people who are really going to excel at this game are the people who put money into it. That's not my favorite part about it. My favorite part about it is that you can go through all of the stories of all the Final Fantasy games and just in a fun way. It's really cool. And this game reminds me a lot of Kingdom Hearts. Record Keeper is one you're going to want to play all the way through, beat the entire game, and if you've played all the Final Fantasies, you are going to love it. Now, if you've only played a few of them, it's going to be a little more difficult. You're not going to know what's happening a lot of the time, but it's still going to be fun because they focus on a lot of the more popular ones that most people have played. And if you've never played Final Fantasy before, play one of them and then play this game. That would be my suggestion for all of this. This is a game made for people who have experience playing Final Fantasy games as opposed to people who've really never had the opportunity. Now we come to number 1, the best, the absolute best phone game that is Final Fantasy related, that is free, Brave Exvius. Oh my gosh, this game. You guys, Brave Exvius is the most fun I've had playing a phone game in a long time. Now there's a reason for that. Brave Exvius is very nostalgic in a Super NES Final Fantasy kind of way. It goes into a story that is very similar to the types of stories told in the SNES Final Fantasy era. Think games like Final Fantasy IV and Final Fantasy VI come to mind. It's action-packed, it's fun, you go through battles, there's a story, it's very linear, but it's very, very, very fun. It draws you in. It's the kind of game that makes me feel like I'm playing one of the old Final Fantasy games. This is like the future of the SNES 2D style Final Fantasies. It's on the phone. Now a lot of people talk and ask like, hey guys, Square Enix, they're messing up, man. They're catering to a Western audience. Everything's action oriented nowadays, and there's no ATB anymore. The active time system, it's gone. There's the RPG elements, the classic RPG elements are gone from games these days now. And I hear you. Square Enix is not exactly doing what they used to do back in the 1990s. However, those games do still exist. They're on your phone. Turns out Square Enix is still making those types of games. They're just on your phone. You've got to pull your phone out down. It's free. Brave Exvius is free. Square Enix has made a classic JRPG, ATB, phone game in the style of the Super NES. And I get you, it's a phone game, it's mobile, you may not want to touch it. I'm telling you, play it. It is worth it. It is a fun game, it's a cool story, and it is very nostalgic and very reminiscent of the SNES Final Fantasy games. So it may seem at the very beginning as though it's very linear. You're watching cutscenes and you fight some battles and you watch the story unfold some more, but you actually can't. There are some exploration elements as well. You tap your thumb on the screen and you can lead your character around in ways that you can't do in the other games that I've mentioned. So it has elements. Now, you're not going to get the complex battle system of the classic RPGs. You're not going to get a deep story. You're not going to get a lot of things that you may be looking for in a Final Fantasy game. But this is the closest that I've seen to those classic, awesome Final Fantasy games than anything I've seen lately from Square Enix. They are still making these games. They're on your phone. Download, do yourself a favor, download this game and play it. This is the #1 best game that Square Enix makes for free on mobile devices. To go through a recap, we got Justice Monsters 5 and King's Knight. Play those just to get into the world of Final Fantasy 15. We've got all the Bravest and Mobius. Play those for a couple hours just to get the experience. They both have unique things to offer, but they're not really worth finishing. And then Record Keeper and Brave Exvius are the ones you should really focus on. Thanks for watching. Now, these are the top 6. This is my opinion. You may have thought Justice Monster 5 was better than Brave Exvius, and that is super cool. This is what I believe the best phone games are, and in my opinion, the ones that are most worth your time going forward and trying to get the most out of Square Enix library of games. Now, if you feel that I've glossed over or missed one of your favorite Final Fantasy phone games, go ahead and let me know which one that is. Thanks for watching, you guys are beasts. This video was all about the Final Fantasy phone games, but if you're curious about where to start and you haven't played any of the Final Fantasy original console games, Mike made an awesome video about which Final Fantasy you should start with. Go ahead and watch that video, it's awesome, and you guys are beasts. I'll see you later. Peace.